The morning mist clung to the cobblestones of Florence as Lorenzo de' Medici made his way through the narrow streets, his footsteps echoing against the ancient walls that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless ambitions. The year was 1513, and the city-state trembled under the weight of political uncertainty. In a modest dwelling near the Ponte Vecchio, a man sat hunched over parchment, his quill moving with deliberate precision across the page. Niccolò Machiavelli, exiled from the corridors of power he once navigated with such skill, was crafting what would become one of history's most enduring treatises on the nature of authority and control. The concept that would later be distilled into the phrase "expose nothing, master everything" was not merely an abstract philosophical principle. It was born from the harsh realities of Renaissance politics, where survival depended on one's ability to maintain an impenetrable facade. Machiavelli understood that true power lay not in grand displays of force or wealth, but in the careful cultivation of mystery, the strategic withholding of information, and the masterful manipulation of perception. As dawn broke over the Tuscan hills, Machiavelli reflected on the lessons learned through decades of observation and participation in the brutal chess game of Italian politics. He had witnessed the spectacular failures of leaders who revealed too much of their intentions, their weaknesses, their fears. He had also observed the quiet triumphs of those who understood that the greatest strength lay in appearing vulnerable while maintaining absolute control over every variable that mattered. The principle of exposing nothing while mastering everything represents perhaps the most sophisticated understanding of power dynamics ever articulated. It recognizes that in a world where information is currency and perception shapes reality, the individual who can maintain perfect opacity while achieving perfect clarity possesses an almost supernatural advantage over their contemporaries. This is not merely about secrecy or deception, though both may serve as tools, but about understanding the fundamental asymmetry that exists between knowledge and revelation, between capability and display. The architecture of concealment. The foundation of Machiavellian power rests on a carefully constructed architecture of concealment that operates on multiple levels simultaneously. At its most basic level, this involves the simple practice of information control, never revealing more than absolutely necessary, never confirming suspicions that might exist, never providing enemies or rivals with ammunition that could be used against you. But true mastery extends far beyond mere secrecy into the realm of strategic ambiguity, where even one's closest allies remain uncertain about the full extent of one's capabilities, intentions, and resources. Consider the merchant princes of Venice, who built their commercial empire not merely through superior products or services, but through their ability to maintain absolute secrecy regarding their trade routes, their sources of supply, their financial reserves, and their strategic partnership. A Venetian trader might appear to be struggling financially while secretly controlling vast networks of commerce that spanned continents. He might seem to have limited political influence while quietly funding the campaigns of multiple candidates for office. This deliberate cultivation of false impressions created a competitive advantage that could be maintained indefinitely as long as the underlying reality remained hidden from view. The psychological dimension of concealment proves equally important in understanding how power operates in practice. Human beings possess an almost irresistible urge to fill information gaps with assumptions, often projecting their own fears, desires, and limitations onto those who remain mysterious. A leader who reveals nothing about his true capabilities forces others to imagine what those capabilities might be, and imagination almost always exceeds reality in both positive and negative directions. This creates a zone of psychological uncertainty that can be exploited in numerous ways. When Francesco Sforza conquered Milan in 1450, he understood that his relatively modest military forces would be insufficient to maintain control over a city accustomed to independence. Instead of attempting to rule through obvious displays of strength, he cultivated an aura of omniscience and omnipresence that made his actual capabilities irrelevant. Citizens believed he had spies in every household, soldiers in every alley. The reality was far more modest, but the perception created a form of control that proved more effective than any army. This principle extends into the realm of emotional concealment as well. The leader who exposes his fears, his enthusiasms, his prejudices, and his personal weaknesses provides others with a roadmap for manipulation. Every revealed preference becomes a potential lever that can be used against him. Every expressed emotion becomes a tool that others can exploit. The master of concealment learns to maintain perfect composure regardless of circumstances, never allowing external events to penetrate the carefully maintained facade of controlled indifference. The great banking families of Renaissance Italy understood this principle instinctively. When the Medici faced financial crises that might have destroyed lesser institutions, they maintained the appearance of absolute stability and confidence. They continued to fund lavish public works, continued to host elaborate celebrations, continued to speak as if their resources were inexhaustible. This theatrical performance of strength often proved sufficient to restore actual strength, as investors and partners remained confident in the family's prospects even during periods of genuine vulnerability. The architecture of concealment also requires understanding the difference between necessary revelation and voluntary exposure. Every interaction demands some degree of information exchange, but the skilled practitioner learns to reveal only what serves his purposes while extracting maximum intelligence from others. An asymmetrical exchange creates cumulative advantages over time, as each interaction leaves the practitioner better informed while his counterparts remain in darkness about his true nature and intentions. The mechanics of mastery while concealment provides the defensive foundation of Machiavellian power. Mastery represents its offensive component. To master everything means to develop comprehensive understanding and control over all factors that might influence one's position, success, or security. This requires systematic study, careful observation, strategic thinking, and patient cultivation of influence across multiple domains simultaneously. The concept of mastery begins with self-knowledge, understanding one's own strengths and weaknesses with brutal honesty, while ensuring that this understanding never becomes visible to others. The leader who knows himself completely can compensate for his limitations, leverage his advantages, and present a facade that conceals vulnerability while projecting strength. This internal mastery provides the foundation for all external manipulation and control. Cesare Borgia exemplified this principle during his brief but spectacular career as a Renaissance warlord. He understood that his greatest weakness lay in his dependence on his father's papal authority, but he never allowed potential enemies to perceive this vulnerability. Instead, he systematically worked to create independent sources of power. Military forces loyal to him personally, political alliances that would survive changes in Rome, financial resources that existed outside papal control. While appearing to be merely his father's instrument, he was actually building a power base that could function autonomously. The mastery of external factors requires developing what might be called intelligence supremacy, knowing more about every relevant situation than anyone else involved. This means cultivating sources of information throughout society, from the highest levels of government to the most humble servants and workers. It means understanding the financial situations, personal relationships, psychological vulnerabilities, and hidden motivations of everyone who might impact your interests. It means tracking trends, anticipating changes, and positioning yourself to benefit from developments that others fail to foresee. The Rothschild banking dynasty demonstrated this principle magnificently during the Napoleonic Wars. While other investors struggled with limited and delayed information about military developments, the Rothschilds maintained a private intelligence network that often provided them with news days or weeks before it reached government officials. This information advantage allowed them to make investment decisions that appeared prescient but were actually based on superior knowledge. Their competitors attributed their success to luck or supernatural insight, never realizing that it stemmed from systematic intelligence gathering. Mastery also requires understanding the psychological terrain on which power operates. Every individual can be understood in terms of their dominant motivations, their fears, their vanities, and their blind spots. The master learns to identify these psychological pressure points and to craft approaches that exploit them effectively. This is not necessarily malicious. Often the best outcomes result from understanding what others truly want and helping them achieve those goals in ways that serve your purposes as well. The art of reading character becomes essential to this process. Observable behaviors, speech patterns, emotional reactions, and decision-making tendencies all provide clues about underlying psychological structures. The individual who learns to decode these signals gains the ability to predict behavior, influence outcomes, and position himself advantageously in any social or professional context. Financial mastery represents another crucial dimension of comprehensive control. Money provides independence, creates options, and enables the pursuit of long-term strategies that might otherwise be impossible. But true financial mastery goes beyond mere accumulation to include understanding how money moves through society, how markets function, how credit operates, and how economic trends develop. This knowledge enables the practitioner to profit from other people's financial decisions while protecting himself from the consequences of economic volatility.
The Venetian Republic maintained its independence for over 1,000 years, partly because its leaders understood financial principles that remained mysterious to most contemporary rulers.
While other states depleted their treasuries through expensive military campaigns or lavish court expenditures, Venice developed sophisticated banking systems, insurance markets, and international trade networks that generated continuous revenue streams. This financial mastery enabled them to hire the best mercenary armies when necessary while maintaining resources for other forms of influence and control. Technical mastery in relevant fields provides another avenue for establishing dominance. In an age where most people remain ignorant about the systems that govern their lives, the individual who understands technology, law, finance, psychology, or any other specialized domain possesses enormous advantages. This knowledge can be leveraged directly through professional success or indirectly through the ability to identify opportunities and avoid pitfalls that remain invisible to others. The principle of mastery extends into the realm of timing as well. Understanding when to act and when to wait, when to reveal and when to conceal, when to advance and when to retreat requires developing an almost intuitive sense of rhythm and momentum. The greatest strategies fail if implemented at the wrong moment, while modest tactics can achieve extraordinary results when properly timed. The integration of power, the true genius of the Machiavellian approach, lies not in either concealment or mastery alone, but in their integration into a coherent system that amplifies the power of each component. When perfect opacity combines with comprehensive understanding, the result is a form of influence that operates almost like magic from the perspective of those who cannot perceive its mechanisms. This integration begins with understanding that information asymmetry is the fundamental source of power in most human interactions. The individual who knows more while revealing less automatically occupies a superior position regardless of other factors like wealth, social status, or formal authority. This advantage can be maintained indefinitely as long as the asymmetry persists, and it tends to compound over time as superior information leads to better decisions and better outcomes. The integration process requires developing what might be called strategic patience, the ability to pursue long-term objectives while maintaining short-term flexibility. Many people fail to achieve their goals because they either lack long-term vision or become so fixated on distant objectives that they cannot adapt to changing circumstances. The Machiavellian practitioner learns to hold ultimate goals lightly while pursuing them relentlessly, adjusting tactics as necessary while never losing sight of strategic direction. Cardinal Richelieu exemplified this principle throughout his career as chief minister to Louis XIII of France. His ultimate goal of strengthening royal authority and French power remained constant for decades, but his specific methods evolved continuously in response to changing circumstances. He formed alliances with Protestant states when necessary to counter Catholic Austria. He supported the nobility when their interests aligned with royal power and crushed them when they posed threats. This flexibility enabled him to pursue consistent objectives through dramatically changing political landscapes. The integration of concealment and mastery also requires developing multiple levels of operation simultaneously. At the surface level, one presents whatever image serves immediate tactical needs. At deeper levels, one pursues more fundamental objectives while maintaining operational flexibility. The most sophisticated practitioners operate on so many levels simultaneously that even careful observers cannot determine their true priorities or ultimate intentions. This multi-layered approach provides protection against both failure and success. If surface-level activities fail, deeper strategies remain intact and can be activated. If surface-level activities succeed beyond expectations, the underlying infrastructure exists to capitalize on these opportunities. The practitioner who operates on only one level remains vulnerable to both unexpected reverses and unforeseen advantages. The psychological dimension of integration proves particularly crucial for long-term effectiveness. Maintaining perfect concealment while pursuing comprehensive mastery requires enormous mental discipline and emotional control. The individual must learn to compartmentalize different aspects of his life, to maintain consistent facades regardless of internal states, and to derive satisfaction from achievements that cannot be publicly acknowledged or even discussed. This psychological challenge explains why many people who understand Machiavellian principles intellectually fail to implement them effectively in practice. The sustained effort required to maintain concealment while building mastery demands a particular type of character that combines patience, discipline, intelligence, and emotional resilience in rare proportions. Those who possess these qualities naturally tend to gravitate toward positions of influence, while those who lack them often find themselves manipulated by others who understand these principles more completely. The integration process also requires understanding how to leverage the human tendency to underestimate hidden capabilities. Most people judge others based on visible evidence and assume that what they cannot see does not exist. This cognitive bias creates opportunities for the concealed master to operate with minimal resistance, as others consistently underestimate both his abilities and his intentions. When Thomas Cromwell served as Henry VIII's principal advisor, he cultivated an image as a competent but unremarkable administrator, while actually building the most sophisticated intelligence network in European history. Foreign ambassadors and domestic rivals viewed him as a useful but limited bureaucrat, never suspecting that he possessed detailed knowledge of their private correspondence, financial situations, and personal vulnerabilities. This misperception allowed him to manipulate political developments throughout Europe while appearing to be merely an efficient civil servant. The integration of concealment and mastery ultimately creates what might be called invisible authority, the ability to influence outcomes without appearing to exercise power. This represents the highest form of control because it operates below the level of conscious awareness for most people. They find themselves making decisions that serve your interests without understanding why, supporting positions that benefit you without recognizing the connection, and opposing your enemies without realizing they have been guided toward these choices. The creation of invisible authority requires understanding how influence actually operates in human psychology. Direct commands and obvious manipulation tend to generate resistance, while subtle guidance and apparent choice tend to generate compliance. The master learns to structure situations so that others voluntarily choose the options that serve his purposes, believing themselves to be acting according to their own preferences and judgment. This form of influence proves far more durable than authority based on fear, wealth, or formal position because it operates through internal conviction rather than external compulsion. People who believe they have chosen their own course of action will defend that course more vigorously than those who know they are following orders. The concealed master who can create genuine conviction in others has achieved a form of control that can survive changes in circumstances that would destroy more obvious forms of power. The ultimate integration of these principles creates what Renaissance theorists called sprezzatura, an appearance of effortless superiority that conceals the intense preparation and calculation required to achieve consistent success. The master appears to succeed naturally and inevitably, without apparent effort or concern. This impression reinforces his authority while discouraging challenges from those who cannot understand the source of his effectiveness. The maintenance of this integrated system requires constant vigilance and continuous adaptation. The political, economic, and social environments within which power operates change continuously, and strategies that prove effective in one context may become counterproductive in another. The successful practitioner must develop the ability to recognize environmental changes quickly and adjust his approach accordingly, while maintaining the core principles of concealment and mastery that provide long-term effectiveness. Understanding these principles intellectually represents only the first step in their implementation. True mastery requires years of practice, careful study of results, and continuous refinement of technique. The individual who commits to this path must be prepared for a lifetime of learning, as the complexity of human nature and social dynamics ensures that new challenges will continue to emerge regardless of previous experience or accumulated wisdom. The rewards of this commitment extend far beyond mere material success or social recognition. The individual who masters these principles achieves a form of personal autonomy that remains unavailable to those who remain dependent on others for their security, success, or satisfaction. This independence creates opportunities for genuine achievement and authentic contribution that would otherwise remain impossible. Yet the practitioner must also understand that these principles, like all forms of knowledge, carry moral responsibilities. The power to conceal while mastering can be used to serve noble purposes or destructive ones, to benefit society or to exploit it. The ultimate measure of a Machiavellian approach lies not in its effectiveness alone, but in the purposes toward which that effectiveness is directed. The legacy of Niccolò Machiavelli himself illustrates this point perfectly. His principles have been employed by some of history's greatest statesmen and most effective leaders to create stability, prosperity, and progress. They have also been used by tyrants and criminals to pursue destructive goals that have caused immense human suffering. The principles themselves remain morally neutral, tools that derive their ethical significance from the intentions and character of those who employ them. As the sun set over Florence on that distant evening in 1513, Machiavelli completed his meditation on the nature of effective leadership. He understood that he had articulated principles that would remain relevant as long as human beings continued to interact in complex social and political systems. The fundamental dynamics of concealment and mastery, of information asymmetry and strategic patience, of surface presentation and hidden capability would continue to shape the distribution of power and influence regardless of changes in technology. The wisdom contained in the principle of expose nothing, master everything represents perhaps the most practical and enduring insight into the nature of human power that has ever been formulated. It recognizes that success in any competitive environment depends on maintaining advantages that others cannot perceive or duplicate. It acknowledges that true strength often appears as weakness, that genuine knowledge manifests as apparent ignorance, and that lasting influence operates through invisible channels that bypass conscious resistance. For those who choose to embrace these principles, the path forward requires dedication, intelligence, patience, and above all, character sufficient to wield power responsibly. The individual who exposes nothing while mastering everything possesses capabilities that extend far beyond personal advancement into the realm of genuine leadership and lasting contribution. In a world that grows ever more complex and interconnected, these timeless principles of concealment and mastery remain as relevant today as they were 5 centuries ago when an exiled civil servant first set them down on parchment in a small house overlooking the Arno River. The morning mist had long since cleared from the streets of Florence, but the wisdom born in that distant moment continues to illuminate the path toward effective action and meaningful achievement for all who possess the courage and commitment to follow where it leads.